Oh yes, you know, we're back again to do some more 2020s content, and we have been keeping it up throughout the year so far. We're about halfway through the decade, so I've been dropping lots of different types of videos highlighting different genres, doing different tier lists, giving you the 10 best of this genre, the 10 best of that genre. Well, you can click all those videos in the playlist that you should be watching more of those. You should be seeing all of those because we've got all kinds of different videos on the way as well. And today we're looking at the 10 most underrated albums of the 2020s so far. You know how I like to do it on this channel. I like to highlight some of the unsung heroes, some excellent music that every year always goes way under the radar, flies way below where it should be. Should be at the top of the iceberg, the tip of the iceberg, being talked about by everybody, but they're not. They're always down below the ocean. What a stupid metaphor that was, but you get what I'm trying to say. 10 albums that I think should be in the conversation for maybe even being some of the best of the decade so far, but for some reason they're not. So therefore they are undiscovered and they are way too overlooked and underrated. So let me know what you would pick in the comments. What are some underrated albums that I may have missed myself that you think should be in those kinds of conversations for the 2020 so far as well? Click the subscribe button, click the like button, check out my Patreon, support me over on there as well. And yeah, let's get on with the list. No particular order, all kinds of genres being talked about here. Anything's up for grabs. Let's go. The whole life will be just you believe in. I want to start with Cleo Sol, who dropped one of the best R&B and neo soul albums from last year, and I think the decade so far. She has an incredible voice, incredible at like making really laid back but really well thought out and super beautiful music that is really, really touching and simple at times. It doesn't feel like there's a huge amount going on, but my God, the impact is super strong. And it might not be an immediate first listen, you're in love with it, but I will say if you sit with it, I think you'll absolutely start to appreciate some of the really stunning details, like the backdrops of the music, the backdrops of the instrumentals are beautiful, paired with her fantastic voice. Life Will Be is such a great track as well. Yeah, really feel like this one got completely swept under the rug for some bizarre reason. She is somebody that is at least recognizable from the Little Sims album, Sometimes I Might Be Introvert. She's on one of the best tracks on that whole thing. So if you're a fan of that performance on Woman, check out her solo music because she's brilliant, and this album is absolutely great. Give Me Monaco next with one of the most essential micro house electronic albums of the decade so far. This was genuinely a top 10 album for me of the year 2020. Absolutely stunning music here. And Give Me Monaco as an artist has proven himself to be really consistent as well. He's dropped a couple of EPs since this album that I thought were really, really strong, with amazing tracks like Lava appearing on those EPs too. And yeah, just the rhythms, the grooves, very much in line with some classic stuff such as like John Hopkins and maybe even like a Nicholas Jar. Just anybody that's a fan of that kind of stuff. These are huge names to be name dropping for such an unknown artist, but let me tell you, man, this album is up there with the very best. I was absolutely blown away by this thing. Really get locked in to these incredible rhythms on this album. Such a great experience, and yeah, this was truly a massive highlight for the decade for me, and I've seen very few people talk about it. Get on it! Jaubi with Naphs at Peace. This is one of the most spiritual and peaceful albums I think you'll hear this decade completely, of all genres, but this is an incredible jazz album that has some really beautiful like woodwind instrumentation that just really calms you and just makes you feel like you're in a utopian universe where everything's just perfect. Like, it really settles you down the minute it starts. It's an incredibly beautiful and stark album that has some stunning melodies across the whole thing. I did see some talk about it and it did get some praise when it came out, so maybe it's more of like an overlooked type album, but even still, I've been very not seen enough. Very not seen enough, if that even friggin' makes sense. It does not make sense. Talk on this since it dropped. Like, it really should be up there with the very best jazz albums of the 2020 so far. and you tend to just see the same names popping up all the time. You know, Kamasi Washington, Shabaka Hutchins, great artists in their own right, don't get me wrong, but jazz does not stop there. You should go beyond and listen to this. It's incredible. If you're wanting something more extreme and more in the hyperpop realm, then I think PVA is one artist that I think you're just going to be head over heels for. This is probably the most pop album on this whole list, really, but it really isn't just pop. It kind of blends so many exciting electronic elements all together to create this really, really bonkers and off the wall album. It's very futuristic in how it sounds too. Like Untethered doesn't sound like it came from this decade at all. It sounds like it came from like 20 years into the future. I love when music has that effect but doesn't sound like gimmicky or doesn't sound, you know, annoying or anything like that. I think it can kind of go the other way, but this album goes far forward into the future, sounds really, really ahead of its time, and is just so enjoyable as well. What a performer PVA is. Like, this is an incredibly fun, danceable, exciting, extreme album that needs more ears on it. Come on, listen to it.
Silver spoon got rust, residue on me got dust. No, I'm wrong, but I don't give a fuck.
You didn't think I was going to ignore hip-hop, did you? No, no, no. I'm not going to be doing that for this list because there's been a few underrated hip-hop albums of the decade so far. And the first one I want to mention is Jeshi's Universal Credits. I have talked and talked and talked to death about how much I like this album. I even referenced it in my most recent review on this channel of Vince Staples. Like, just an incredible album that really touches on what life is really like for people who are way down at the bottom, like people that really, really know what it's like to struggle, to come from horrible backgrounds, stricken by poverty, and the details he manages to conjure up. Like, it is very much, he knows what it's like. You couldn't say some of the things he says without knowing exactly what it's like. Like, he is no fraud. He truly gets it, and he speaks for so many people, particularly in the UK, in a world of, you know, horrible cost of living issues and stuff like that. And yeah, really hilarious album cover too. Very much understanding the issues with the UK government and the life for people who live in these kinds of areas, and for young black people as well, you know, minorities in the UK. Yeah, just such an amazing job of touching on all those things, and it's incredibly relatable for so many people. I just can't believe this isn't talked about enough. Like, the tracks are really well produced. His rapping is great as well. I don't know what more he could have done with this album. He should be up there talked about in the same way Dave is, in the same way Stormzy is, and yet he just didn't get that praise. So good. Please listen to it. Haruka Nakamura is an unsung hero of ambient music, just really been making some incredible music since the dawn of time. No, it's not been that long, but his earliest stuff like Twilight is fantastic, from 2010, and 10 years later he proved that he still has it on this album here. Just like an incredibly, like, stripped back, beautiful, subtle piano album that doesn't really have much else than that. Like, it is just very much that. It does what it says on the tin, and it does it so friggin' well. It's really, really harrowing. It's really sparse. It's really empty at times. It's hollow, but it really is stunning. Honestly, if you want something that's just background, peaceful music, check this out. You thought I was going to end this video without mentioning Emily Steinwall, Welcome to the Garden? You'd be a fool. Because this was in fact my album of the year for 2021. It was just straight up the best album I heard in that entire year, and it remains to be the best album of that year in my opinion too. So it was that good. I gave it that huge amount of praise, and yet still so many of you don't listen to me. It is just incredible. Please check it out. It is as good as I am telling you it is. Welcome to the Garden has these incredible, like, progressive art rock elements to it. It's just a ridiculous, bold way to start an album. It's like a 10-minute mammoth of a track, and it's just insanely good. And then you've got tracks like Bloom, which are stunning. The vocals, she sounds like a freaking dove. The instrumentals are like these really beautiful chamber pop, art pop instrumentals in the way that you'd expect somebody like Julia Holter or somebody in that kind of realm to be putting out. And yet she is so barely even talked about and barely even known. Like the talent levels are insane for somebody that probably, I don't know, has like 100 Bandcamp followers or some shit. I don't know. It's just ridiculous how good this album is, right? It's just so good. And yet does not get talked about enough. Really was an amazing experience when I first played it. Still is. Album of the year for 2021. One of the most underrated and overlooked albums of this decade. Grace Cummings, Storm Queen, one of the most unique voices of the decade so far. This was a really interesting album to lay your ears on for the first time because the vocals of Grace are just so unique and strange and odd, but they sound so good and often at times sound incredibly beautiful as well. The writing has incredible imagery to it, just really, really detailed production. That sounds fantastic at times, like Up in Flames and Regala, just amazing tracks. Yeah, like I say, the vocals are just so unique that I expected more people to just lay their ears onto this, particularly lovers of music that dig deep and listen to all kinds of music. I feel like that kind of artsy feel to this album might have appealed to way more people than it did, but it unfortunately just went under the radar. And yeah, I feel like anybody that's a fan of somebody like Nick Cave, like that writing style at times and the vocal uniqueness meshed together, really remind me of somebody like Nick. Absolutely check this out. This was a great album for the year it came out. One of the best of the decade too. Gone under the radar. One from 2024 that isn't very old at this point. Glass Beach. Did think this one went a bit underrated. I feel their first album got a lot of buzz, a lot of excitement was surrounding that one. And this album seemed to get a less buzz around it, but I thought it was a better album. I really appreciate so many of the intricate details in the lyrics, some really, really beautiful moments with the writing, really emotional, really potent, really poignant stuff. The instrumentation at times is fantastic. I mean, Motion is just one of the best rock songs of the year for sure. Love that track. But then they kind of go into this more like, you know, experimental route with some of the tracks. They take these really interesting detours. Some of the tracks have lengthy instrumentals that go on for quite some time and they meander and dart around in a similar way to maybe something like a Radiohead would do. Really interesting album in a musical sense, and lyrically I think it's really interesting as well. Glass Beach are great. Like, they should have got a lot more love for this album. It got some attention for sure, but I just think it's gone a bit underrated. Music fans, music lovers are aware of these guys, but they underrate them for me. I think this should be one of the best of the year in that kind of conversation. It seems to have fallen out of that a little bit. I'm in hell, nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. They got me boxing all alone, I couldn't even... Finally, my boy Kahlil Blu. Could have mentioned a couple of albums because there was also Dog that came out in 2020. But I think Metropolis is the one I want to mention here because this one might be slightly better, even though at the time I thought it was worse. But it's just so addictive. Like, this guy has such a way of making these really fun, exciting, bouncy, trap-inspired instrumentals, and he just flows over them so seamlessly. Like, he's just such a great rapper in that sense. It's not the most lyrical thing you've ever heard, but I think he's a really good wordsmith at times and just makes such catchy, addictive, replayable hip-hop music that I just find to be so overlooked. Like, he should be in better conversations, I think, by now. These 2 albums under his belt are already really strong. And yeah, I think in terms of modern rappers that blend so many like fun styles together while also being, you know, good at rapping. Like, he should be more in more of those conversations, okay? Really like Kahlil Blu. Metropolis is a great album. And I think over time, we might start to see more love for him. But at the moment, he's getting underrated and he shouldn't be. And that is it from me. These are the 10 most underrated albums of the 2020 so far. If you agree with me, please let me know. If you disagree with me, also let me know. Tell me what your picks would be. What would the 10 most underrated albums of the decade for you be? Because there may be some I've missed out on and I need to check out more of. Subscribe, check out my Patreon, follow me over on there. You can get perks, you can get access to the Discord server, you get shout outs in videos as well, all kinds of good stuff. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Check out these albums and then come back to me, see what you think. Have a good day, subscribe, goodbye.